We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. Like anybody, I'd like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned with that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountaintop. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. Now, I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. Good morning. Good morning, Pastor Tom and Goddess Leah. I am both honored and humbled to have been asked to deliver this message this morning, and quite frankly, I am sleepy because I did not get much sleep any last night, because I take this moment very seriously. To be standing here in this sacred space is an awesome opportunity. It is a frightening opportunity, quite frankly. So I tossed and turned last night trying to convince myself that I was worthy of this moment and that I would somehow be able to deliver a message that would be worthwhile, that would even be transformational. Because right now, in this moment, a moment that I am certain Dr. King was talking about when he mentioned in the letter from a Birmingham jail, a moment that he would have called the fierce urgency of now. That is the kind of moment that we are in. A moment that is the fierce urgency of now. So I tossed and turned last night because, quite frankly, I was afraid. Not just for me. I am afraid, not just for Black America, not just for white America, not just for Jewish America, or Asian America, or Latina America, any other sector of America. I am afraid for America. I am afraid that this place, which at times has been referred to as the promised land, has been referred to as the shining city on a hill, has even been referred to as a beacon of hope. I'm not sure that we can refer to America in those various ways as we stand here today. Not now. Not with this fierce moment. This moment that is the fierce urgency of now. So I want to just quote another excerpt from Dr. King. Dr. King once said, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Put another way, my joy is relative to your pain. Your pain is relative to my joy. Dr. King also said, according to the great Harry Belafonte, he said this the week before he was assassinated. For all the steps we've taken, I'm afraid we are integrating into a burning house. If we look at what was happening then in America, Dr. King was correct in his assessment. If we look at what is happening in America now, Dr. King would still be correct. The difference between now and then is that the lines of segregation were starkly drawn back then. Then the lines divided us based solely on race, based solely on what one looked like. And it was undergirded by the vicious and violent system of Jim Crow. But now the battle for the soul of America is fought on a variety of fields. Race remains the primary factor, but increasingly, the battle for the soul of America is fought on the fields of class and even political affiliation. In other words, white America is no longer tacitly united in the blatant acceptance of racial segregation. That's the good news. The bad news is as the American social glacier flows through the waters of change toward a future wherein white Americans will become a minority and people of color a majority. There are factions that are attempting to take us back to the Jim Crow South. They believe not only that America is the exclusive domain of whiteness, but they believe that America is and has always been the paradise of white Christianity. In other words, they have weaponized religion to facilitate the aims of white supremacy. Yet there exists an unstoppable counterforce. That force is the emergence of a multicultural society that will insist upon our either learning to live together as a united nation or alternatively perishing together as a nation that is divided and wayward. As I stand here in this place today, the question must be asked, what of the church? What of the believers? What must it do? What must they do? What must we do? As Dr. King said, what affects one directly affects all indirectly. This question is the central theme of the prolific writer James Baldwin's book, The Fire Next Time. In it, Baldwin points to religion as the root cause of oppression in America. He indicts religion for perpetuating narrow thinking, promoting separatism, and urging racial violence. Does this sound familiar? The last 5 years have caused America to spiral into a kind of identity crisis. We can no longer, as we have in the past, be that shining city on the hill, nor a beacon of hope, not in the condition that we're in now. The truth is, America has never been a shining city on a hill, nor a beacon of hope to its black citizenry. Who could have expected such an exalted perception of a country wherein black life is always on the line, between red lines and protest lines and headlines, and now long lines? Yet those like Congressman John Lewis and Fannie Lou Hamer, and yes, Dr. King, against all odds, held out hope. Hope has been the through line in all that we have done and attempted to do. Hope is what inspired Dr. King's life. Hope is what allows each of us to start anew each day. Hope is what must guide our actions here on out. Even in Baldwin's assessment and his indictment of America and its religious practices, he held out hope. He said the following, and I mean, quote, I mean the relatively conscious whites and the relatively conscious blacks who must, like lovers, insist on or create the consciousness of others. Do not falter in our duty now. We may be able, handful as we are, to end the racial nightmare and achieve our country, and even change the history of the world. Hope is what has to drive us even in this mountain of despair. Dr. King put it another way. He said, a mountain of despair, out of a mountain of despair, a stone of hope. Years ago, when the MLK Memorial was first mounted, I visited with a camera crew to do a story on the erection of that monument. And that day it was raining cats and dogs. I mean, there were raindrops that were literally that big. So we were not able to accomplish what we had set out to accomplish. But I had written some notes that I read on the way back as we put our tails between our legs and got in our cars and drove back to Baltimore. I had written some notes, and out of those notes, as I reviewed them on my way back, I thought about what would Dr. King have said of a monument that in the process of building it, the people who were charged with that duty were fighting amongst each other over money. Who's going to get what and how much? That this monument cost several $1 million to erect. What would Dr. King have thought of that? Would he have preferred that that money be spent on feeding the hungry? Would he have preferred that that money be spent on clothing the naked? Would he have preferred that that money be spent on educating the intellectual curious? What would he have thought of that monument? So in my thinking that, I imagined what he might say. And in my humble opinion, he may have said something like this as he stood before that monument. Standing here before this memorial, it's quite easy for one to become awestruck by the mere immensity of it. That's what monuments are meant to do. They are meant to move us. They are meant to inspire us. But monuments also bear the capacity to bury beneath them the very stories that led to the building of the monument in the first place. Stories of shared sacrifice, stories of courage and stories of valor. Each stone in the rock of the monument represents one of the stories within the narrative of human struggle. In this regard, each stone in this monument represents a stone of hope. There are acts, some small and some large, of which we may never hear, but they're nonetheless part of the building process. Most of us will never have a monument built in our honor, but all of us can help build a monument. All of us can help build a monument to the great story of democracy. I think he may have said something like that. But as we stand here today, we cannot be myopic and think about a presidential election for the next 4 years. What's happening now is too big for that. We cannot be concerned about what's going to happen in the midterms. We have to act. We have to make sure that we do our part by voting. We have to make sure we do our part by joining organizations. We have to make sure we do our part by doing, as Pastor Tom said, talking to those who are telling lies and try to guide them toward the truth. We have to do all of those things. So far, the response to what is happening in this country has been soft and muted. It has been wrought with diplomacy that is not big enough to meet the moment. The fierce urgency of now is upon us, and we have to act accordingly. I am happy to be a member of Govans Racial Justice Ministry. It's an outlet that allows my voice to be heard along with others. But that's not enough. If we stop there, we fell short. We absolutely must become engaged. Those who have never thought about becoming active must have a change of mind and certainly a change of heart. This is that moment. We are not just in a contest to win elections. We are not just concerned with the temporary loss of political power. What is at stake is the absolute eradication of democracy. And as a black man, that scares me to death. I cannot imagine in 2022 what it would be like for me to have to revert backward. I don't have the stomach for it. I cannot do it. It is an absolute impossibility. And not just for me, and not just for black people. Imagine what it would be like for white people of goodwill to have to exist in that kind of reality. It's unthinkable. It's unthinkable. We have to do better, as the late Congressman Elijah Cummings once said. We have to be, we must be better. This is that moment. And we cannot falter. We cannot rest until we have rescued this country, which is now on life support. We have gotten to a point where there are those who will use a pandemic to plow their political plots. There are those who will put the lives of others in danger to reflect their angst at a government that is merely set up to serve all people. There are those who will put their own lives in danger and that of others to make a political point. And they are not going to stop. Not by themselves. They must be stopped. And I don't believe that Dr. King, if he were here today, would talk to us as that airbrushed figure that so many of us are familiar with. Dr. King was a nonviolent man when nonviolence was necessary. But the reality is, we are headed toward what could be one of the most catastrophic, violent moments in our history. That's our reality, and we can't sugarcoat it. So again, I ask you, I beg you, vote. Vote. Call your representatives and say to them, you must vote for the right causes. You must vote for the John Lewis Voting Act. You must vote for the supplemental bill. You must vote for the child tax credit. You must vote for all that is going to help to restore this democracy. If Dr. King stood for anything, if his legacy is to be taken seriously by any of us, we cannot allow this country to be anything other than a democracy. It is what allows us to get up each morning and start anew with hope. Thank you so much.